Emily and I are going to give you a preview of Core of Discovery. This is the newest one from Off the Page Games. Same team who brought us Mind Management.
Yes.
This also has some deduction. In fact, they call it on their page the ultimate deduction game. I'm here to tell you, it's just as much exploration and survival as it is deduction, because that survival feeling is something that we felt significant.
Yes, it's very punishing, very challenging game. So it is cooperative.
Yeah.
We are one team going out together to explore this different land. You definitely get the exploration feel, but there's lots of things working against you. So you're going to need to use your team aspect and your deduction in order to survive through it.
Yeah, and before we go any further, what you see here is the game set up. Don't worry, we're not ruining anything with spoilers. This is a sheet that was made specifically for us, so this won't be repeated in the final game.
Yep.
But we showed you the end game state here so we could point out a few things and how the game works. This is set in the Manifest Destiny world, which is kind of an alternate history. So we are Lewis and Clark, or members of their team, exploring the territory here, but there are things like Minotaurs, for example, in our scenario. There are 4 different types of scenarios. You've got fauna, which we played. There's flora, insecta, and then the meter. These are all different types of scenarios that come with different rules and a bunch of different sheets with different sort of setups for each sort of session.
Also different components, different cards or different like gear, people who you can play that come into play for each different type of scenario. So like, for example, Sacagawea, we couldn't play with this one specifically.
Right.
She's a very good hunter, but playing with where we're trying to get some of these minotaurs out, she would have made it too easy. So
That's true.
It's definitely variable in how each thing is set up.
And not only that, is very variable with the rules that are in play too, with the logic and the deduction that comes in, because as you reveal icons on this board, you're trying to effectively gather a bunch of resources to overcome a lot of challenges. Those challenges, in this case, were fighting off minotaurs. Again, we're using resources to do that, but there's also a number of challenges that you're going to face during every given day, and the game plays over sort of days, and those are the rounds. And each of those challenges are going to require some amount of resources, and maybe in some cases for you to have accomplished some things throughout the game.
So on your turn, you're actually going to go out and you're going to explore. So you're going to find a space that's adjacent to something that you've already looked at. So I can look here, for example. I'm going to take it off. It's going to use one of my daylight hours. So it's going towards the challenge that we're trying to do right away. And then I get the resource that's underneath it. So in this example, I'd get a skull. And if it happens to be a skull, that also means we're going to do a threat card. So a new threat would come out, and this one we were seeing minotaurs come out. They're going to block our path and then kind of do other things that we're going to try to find ways to kill them in the end. But that's basically what we're doing on our turn, is we're taking a new thing, getting some resources, stuff's happening. But the reason the deduction comes in is because there's all these different rules on where things can and cannot be on the board.
Yeah, we have this sheet as a reminder, but you can see it right here as well. In the fauna setup, you're going to have similar rules every single time. This says water is at least next to one wood and vice versa. So they're going to be next to each other. So if you find a water, you know that there's going to be wood adjacent to it somewhere orthogonally. And this one is diagonal. So if you find a food, it's going to be near a teepee or vice versa. As you can see, there's a lot of rules like that, some of which are a little different. This one says there's going to be one wood and only one wood in any column and or row. So you'll know that once you find a wood in this column, there's no more wood in that column and no more wood in that row. So there's going to be wood throughout. And again, these are all sparse resources that you need to collect to overcome these challenges. So if you're in search of a wood and you don't have it narrowed down, it's going to be difficult to find it.
Yes, and we also have limited number of spaces. So our backpack can only hold 6 things, and there's a concept of fatigue as well. So if we hold too much, we're going to end up having to pay more water. Water is like our big resource, our big lifeline, because if we ever run out of water, we're just done. At the end of every day, we also have to have a food to be able to feed our people. So there's a lot we're trying to balance at one time where, like you were saying, David, it's really important that we go for the right things at the right time. You never want to be, like, you can't just hold on to a bunch of stuff and hope to use it later. You really only have enough to get exactly what you need right now so we can survive the day.
Right, and speaking of right time and right place, we have characters as well that all come with special abilities and some gear that come with special abilities. These are just 2 of the things you can do as free actions. So back to what Emily was saying, on your turn, you have to flip over a token adjacent to an already explored area. Then you can also do any number of free actions that you have, and there's like 8 free actions. 2 of those are to use your character's special power or your gear special power. Usually you're going to exhaust that so you can't use it again that entire day. But these things are going to do such like, before you explore, guess what it's going to be, and then get 2 of it.
Yes, if you guess right.
If you guess right. Or guess what it's going to be, and then you don't have to use the sun token that you flipped over to exhaust time. You can just discard that, saving time. And saving that precious time is significant because these challenge cards that come out are going to have things that you're faced with, and you have maybe 2 or 3 turns, not rounds, turns to collect everything on that card, or you're going to suffer some sort of fail consequences. And we found ourselves actually looking at some of them and saying, let's just plan on failing that one, and we'll plan for the next one. And that's where the survival aspect really came into play. But like I said, you're going to do a bunch of free actions. There are some free actions also that are sort of available to everyone no matter what character you're playing. You've got build a shelter, build a fire, a number of different things.
Yeah, and the fire is cool too because some of it's needed for later challenges, but it also allows you to backtrack if you have 2 of them. That is going to be something you'd really have to save up for and want to use. The backtracking is super cool because you can explore something essentially and then say, just kidding, I don't want to do that right now, and every moment counts, so let's use 2 fire and backtrack. But in order to do that, we would have had to build 2 fire ahead of time, which like you said are free actions, but they're going to cost us stone and wood.
Yeah, and the building of a shelter is going to cost any 2 of wood, mud, or bone. And when you build a shelter, you're going to take this little shelter token and put it on one of the shelter spaces, which you have to have already found. Otherwise, you can't build a shelter. When you have the shelter, it takes the fatigue sort of out of the game.
Which is good.
Which is good, because there's a lot of times where you're going to check to see whether you have resources stored up there. If you do, you are fatigued, and if you're fatigued, something bad will happen.
You are going to get rid of water, which again is just taking you down and down and down closer to not surviving this.
If you're out of water, there's plenty of ways to lose this game and very few ways to win it. And another reason you're going to want to explore on the board in a specific way is once you get a full column revealed, you're going to be able to take a destiny card. There's going to be 2 destiny cards face up and a pile face down. Those destiny cards, again, are kind of like abilities that you can use. Usually they typically suggest discard this card to do a thing. And those things are unique. The spyglass could let you flip over and look what's under a couple of the exploration tokens on the edge of the board.
We have the backpack too that lets you get rid of all of your samples tokens. Those samples tokens are rough. You get them sometimes even if you pass some of the challenges and they're just taking up spots in your backpack, so you can hold less and less and less while still probably getting fatigued. That's nice to be able to get rid of all of them at once.
Yeah, and some of the destiny cards are then used in some of the challenges or to potentially defeat some of the minotaurs that we faced. Said you need 2 wood and a destiny card. So we needed to do that in order to get the destiny card. And like we said earlier, the survival aspect, at least the way this makes the players feel, it feels very much like a survival game where things are super tight and you're like, well, we had that destiny card to get rid of the minotaur, but now we're in trouble.
Because we also have to do this.
We need to use the destiny card to do this. You're oftentimes surviving to fight another day and hoping for the best, especially when it gets later in the game, because this game really, really ramps. The first challenge card in every game is going to be Approach the Arch. Approach the Arch is going to take 5 turns. There's a little icon in the upper right-hand corner of every card of the challenge cards that tells you how many turns you have. You're going to be placing these on there until that is, and then you have to resolve it. That's the only 5 in this entire deck. The others are 3s, and there are a few 2s. So later in the game, you're just going to have 3 turns, maybe 2, maybe another 2 before the day's over. And then once the day's over, and hopefully you've survived, hopefully you've overcome all of those challenges, then you still have to feed yourself. So you always have to have 1 food at the end of the day, and then there's going to be a cleanup during the night, which is not just good or just bad, but it can be a little bit of both. You're going to basically clean up the game, get ready for the next round, but if there's no monsters out, you're going to get a new threat card, and those threat cards can be those minotaurs that you can kill, which is great news. Although those minotaurs, when they're out on the board,
punishing.
They make it more difficult to explore in their column and row. You have to actually give up a resource to do so. But I actually think they're better than there's an injured card, which we have right here.
Yeah, that was rough for us. So when that came out, so now we can only have 2 challenges in a day instead of 3, which you're like, oh, only 2 challenges. That's good, right?
Shorter day.
It's just a shorter day. So it just means we have to be feeding our people more often, and we have less time to get things done before another threat comes out, or we have to redo all of our stuff. So it can be very, very punishing.
Yeah, it was really interesting. There's a whole stack of gear cards. At the beginning of the game, you can select your character. And again, like Emily said, some of the characters are usable in some scenarios, some aren't.
Yes.
The gear looks to be all usable in any scenario. You're going to pick one of those gear. And I do know in, not the last game we played, but the one before that, there was something that even happened that allowed someone to swap their gear. I think it might have been a Destiny card or something like that. So you can cycle through, but it is an important decision when you're looking at your power and your gear power to think, okay, do we have all of our bases covered here?
And you can play with 1 to 4 players, and at 1 player 2, when you're doing it solo, you also get, I think it's called medicine, so something else as well that's helping you along. So it's not just like, you're 1 player and you're like, now it's impossible. It is making it a little bit more accessible for you.
One more thing I wanted to mention, which I think is just a nice system, because you might be looking at this game and be wondering, how do you set this up without finding out all the information? They actually have, so those folders I showed you earlier, like here's the fauna folder. Inside this are these maps. They're sheets that look just like this underneath this cardboard that have all of those icons on the map, and then this area right here, which gives you some setup information, but also a unique rule specific to just that map. So this is yet another sort of logic rule that we had related to the teepees, the forts, and the mud, which you can see right here. But these folders have all of those in there, and then they give you this sheet right here. You're going to slide that sheet in over on top of the map that you want to use, pull them both out so that that part's invisible to you, and then you can actually slide this in just like this, and then just slide this part out, and you've basically
magic trick there.
Kind of put this in there. But anyway, that is Core of Discovery. If you have any questions at all about it, please let us know in the comments below, because we're happy to get down there and talk to you about how much deduction is in the game, how much exploration is in the game. I think the deduction really does build over time.
Yes, as you learn more information, there's more you can deduce, right?
Just like many deduction game. But at first, we were sitting here exploring, and it does feel like you're just kind of like, well, let's just see what's under this. That's where the exploration feel comes in. But then over time, you're like, oh, wait a minute.
We can't make any wrong moves.
This has got to be wood, right? Let's look at all the rules and figure out, okay, this is either this or this, and sometimes it's a 50-50, and you take your best shot. And then on top of it all, that survival aspect, I can't stress enough how tense and stressful the survival aspect of this game is. At least the scenarios we've played, and I can only imagine all of them feel that way.
Sure, definitely.
But like I said, get down in there in comments, let us know what you think. Until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.